Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. We're not going to start the meeting right now. We're going to have a little update from Forest Service. So come on up. Judy, would you do the honors since I don't know what I'm doing? No comment.
Thank you, Chair. Board members and public, we normally have a standing item for an update related to the Helena fire. Since we don't, we're just going to have an update prior to opening the meeting. And the subject matter will be on restoration and their process, the BOARD process. So I will open it up to Jason McIntyre, the acting district ranger in Windmill.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having us real quick. We just wanted to keep you up to date on the efforts. The fire currently is 91% contained. Right now, for the past week and a half, we've been focused on the repair efforts in anticipation of storms coming in. So hand lines, dozer lines, stuff like that. We start closing those back in and restore them back to normal. So our leading expert on that is Brad Rust, and I'd like to introduce him to the board and let him speak more about the 30,000 foot level of what BOARD is, how we do it, and we can go from there. So this is Brad Rust.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome, Brad.
Thank you. Got some little process paper to pass out to you folks. And it's called the BOARD process. What BOARD is the burned area emergency response. And in the past, we've done many of these. 2008, we had the complex that happened in 2015. We had another complex that hit out in this area. So it's the same process, and I've been doing it for about 15, 20 years, so I get a little bit of experience in it. Just want to explain what we're planning on doing. It's be about a week assessment, and what we're going to look at is look at the fire and how intensely it burned, and what effects did that burn have on the watershed. So when the storms come in, there's lots of erosion, there's lots of sedimentation, and sometimes there can be debris flows and landslides that could happen. So this is a process that evaluates watersheds, what effect certain kind of storms will have in that watershed, and what is to be expected to be impinging on the values at risk. For instance, the values at risk, it could be a highway, it could be homes, it could be some other public infrastructure, and it could be the ecosystem. In this case, it could be like fish habitat, it could be water quality, and those kinds of issues. So this is a process. We had the fire, we put the fire out, we did suppression repair. Suppression repair is almost done, and now we're heading into the next process called the BOARD process. And it's a three-phase process. There's the assessment, as you see in the handout, and then we come up with a prescription. When we do the assessment, we're looking at what kind of watershed response is going to happen to this watershed and to these values of risk. Then we come up with a prescription. It could be that we just need to close the area, protect people. It could be an early warning system, reverse 9/11, that we might have some large debris flows that might come in this watershed. We want to make sure that the public is ready, that they're not in the area, that they'll get damaged or in harm's way. So some of those other prescriptions might be some road treatments to allow the flows to pass without destroying the infrastructure. Some other ones would be protection of cultural resources. Some other might be point protection. In other words, some homes are at risk, put in some point protection to protect those homes. We are going to be doing this as a multi-agency effort. We're having NRCS work with us, and then we're having the BLM work with us in this assessment. So they're going to be providing people to help in the assessment and to come up with the best prescription for the watershed. So if we have a lot of private homes that need assistance they can go to NRCS and the Emergency Watershed Protection Program and get involved with that and receive some sort of help and funding for some spot treatments or point treatments. The next thing, after we do the prescription, we want to make sure everything's working right. So we do monitor this after things are put in to make sure they are working. And if it isn't working properly, then we get more money to fix it. That's with the U.S. Forest Service. Now the BLM has a similar process, and also NRCS has the Emergency Watershed Protection process. So really the assessment is on the second page is what we're going to do. This is an example of a fire that burned. It was a Modoc complex, Parker fire that burned over in Modoc County. This is what we did there, and basically we're going to do the same thing here. So we get imagery, and the imagery is Landsat imagery. It shows how badly the area burned, and then from that we have soil scientists and hydrologists that go out and assess and see if that is indeed the truth in the ground. In other words, we dig holes, we do some assessments, we do some tests, and see, yeah, is there going to be a robust watershed response in this area or not? So we'll adjust that burn area reflectance classification map. It's called a BARD map, and we'll turn it into what we call a soil burn severity map. We want to know what's happened to the soil, because the soil is going to make the determination of how much of runoff will be coming off the hill slope. If the soil is burned up completely and turned to powder, a lot of that's going to run off. If there's a water repellent layer, a lot of that will run off. So we want to see how badly the watershed is burned. And then we'll determine a watershed response. In other words, we'll use some modeling to determine for a 2-year storm, we're looking at this kind of response. For a 5-year storm, for a 10-year storm. We'll use that to establish areas that could possibly be at risk. And these are values at risk, VARs we call them. And those could possibly human life and safety, property, natural resources, and cultural resources. From that, we'll look at the values at risk, and we'll look at the various kinds of treatments. We might decide really the best thing to do is just to close this area off and warn people don't go in this area. Or we might decide the best thing to do is maybe do some land treatments in this area or some point protection. So we'll look at those values at risk and proposed treatments. The number one thing is, though, we want to protect human life and property. The natural and cultural resources, we'll try to do the best we can with those. A lot of times, natural recovery is what's necessary, and the best thing is to keep people out of harm's way. But we will take a look and see if there is treatable ground out there. We'll come up with the treatments, and then within 7 days after we do this assessment, at least on the Fed level side, we have our money to do implementation. It's late in the season, I know, and I've done these late in the season, and sometimes we get a full month worth of work in, and that's fine. We get things in before the storms come. Sometimes the first storm hits, there's damage, and we can't get to it till middle of January or something like that. We have a full year for implementation of this, but we want to try to get it done before the first storms come, because that's where the biggest damage is. So NRCS has a little bit different process. Their process might take a little bit longer. BLM has a similar process as the Forest Service. So their process is a little more long-term. Ours is just for the first 3 years of the fire, after the fire. So this last page You may ask, well, how do you come up with what's to be determined as a risk, and what kind of risk are you going to be doing these treatments on? And it's based on a couple things: the probability of damage or loss and the magnitude of consequences. That's that last page. So if it's a very likely and a moderate, the risk is very high. And you'll see within this matrix, there's the red colored zones, and those are the ones that we will treat in some form or fashion. Intermediate is ones that we'll treat for life and safety. So this is how we come up with the risk. This value at risk, and here is the risk. Because it has a very high risk or high risk, we will do some sort of treatment. NRCS uses the same form, BLM, same form. So we're going to have an integrated team. We're going to do this whole risk assessment together and come up with an approach that makes sense for the whole watershed. So within 7 days, we'll be done. We'll run it through the regional office for our funding. BLM will run it through their funding mechanism. NRCS will run it through their funding mechanism. Forest Service, within 2 weeks, we'll have an answer, how much money we get, and then we're going to utilize as much as we can our force account crews, in other words, our local crews. We'll try to tie in with the local RCD. RCD here is very robust, and they've worked with us very well in the past, so we're going to try to take advantage of their services. And then NRCS is also very responsive with their program. So BLM has a similar mechanism too. So we hope to have a robust response and be able to get these things done in a timely manner. You have any questions?
Yes, you also might want to take a look at using the Watershed Center down in Hayfork.
Absolutely.
They work closely with RCD and NRCS. Also, with the, once you go through the process and find out where there's possible areas that are danger to life, and you come up with the 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, 50 year, whatever, 500 year rain types of washing away, will you be able to share that information with our OES department, and they can figure out when there might be a
Exactly.
problem, and they can start doing.
Exactly. We want to try to coordinate
Okay,
as
thank
well.
you.
Yeah, all that
Good.
information.
Thank you. Yeah, it's Judy's show.
Thank you for the quick update and process. I know I received quite a few calls after that first storm went through, and I know our Director of Transportation and I were far up on Canyon Creek watching some of the stuff hit Canyon Creek, and then I received calls from residents in the area. We hiked toward the Fork Fire to look at some of the source points of where some of this runoff sediment might be happening, because there's big concern, of course, with the next storm, what would happen to the watershed. So I think the public in that area, this is also part of the recovery process, not just also getting people in homes, but the watershed protection is, that watershed is very important, certainly to the area, for people's drinking water as well. So I can talk to you offline of some things we discovered up there, and if it helps at all, but thank you.
That'd be good.
Good. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. West, for your presentation. I have 2 questions. The first one is, you said point protection for the homes and for the people. Could you just give an example? I don't know what that is.
Well, in coordination with NRCS, a lot of times they'll do, either K-rails or sandbags or mulching in and around the structure. What they're trying to do is try to divert the flow of water and erosion away from the structure to protect it. A couple years ago, I think it was the 2015 fires, there was a fire that we worked closely with NRCS, and the only thing we could end up doing was put some large cement blocks in front of their house and making a V like this. And we made it 8 feet tall. Well, the storms came and it came over the top, the flows did, but it saved the structure. So for those situations where, a home is really at risk, we'll try to, work, intercess, or work with us and so forth, and come up with a treatment that's called a point treatment.
Thank you for that example. The other question is, are these maps available online that you're talking about?
Yes.
Where do we look?
They will become available. Right now, it's only internal because we still have to do the ground truthing and to make sure that the map is truly representative of what's happened in the watershed. And once the assessment is done, those maps will become available. So if we could have some sort of mechanism where those maps could be, I don't know if it's, we have to bring the information over to you guys and download it to get it into your system, or as an email, we could send those over and get it into your system.
So they'll be available for the public?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
That was it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
And good morning. Welcome to the Trinity County Board of Supervisors regular meeting, October 3rd, 2017. We're a little late, it's 9:19. And would everybody join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Moving along, going to move over to public comment. This time is for information from the public on matters not appearing on this agenda. All comments are limited to 3 minutes and must pertain to matters within the jurisdiction of this board. When addressing the board, please state your name for the record and address the board as a whole through the chair. No action or discussion will be conducted on matters not listed on this agenda. However, the chair may refer the subject matter to the appropriate department for follow-up or schedule the matter on a subsequent board agenda. Anybody have any public comment they'd like to share with us? Seeing none?
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. Good morning.
Morning. Let me see. I've got two topics that you're probably going to hear from me again in the future. Both of them relate probably to cannabis, not necessarily the one on the agenda right now. The first one is I brought these up at the Planning Commission meeting. The first one is I'm absolutely against the idea of forgiving any felony convictions. And I don't want to say too much more about that. The other one is my concern about manufacturing. Manufacturing means taking a product and changing it and making it a commercial product. Manufacturing might be as simple as just sort of clipping buds and putting them in a container for sale. It might be like making cookies or brownies or things for sale. It might mean making concentrated forms of cannabis, which is usually done using a solvent. And the idea of making a concentrated form is pretty simple. I'm going to give you my version in case there's people that don't have any idea of what this means. Usually it's done by taking a solvent and processing leaves and buds, usually the cheaper stuff, not the buds, because you can get a good price for that. Using a solvent. A solvent is something like water is called a universal solvent. But basically you get the active drug out of the plant and you're able then to sort of boil it down, you might say, and get a concentrated form of it, which can be much more pleasant. Solvents come sort of in two flavors, volatile and non-volatile. Volatile means it boils easily and can catch fire easily. There are methods of extracting the drug using water and ice, which is certainly not very flammable. Some use alcohol, and some very commonly heard of thing is butane currently. Butane is nice because it's cheap, you can get it. Economy is important. Butane boils at room temperature, so you don't have to heat it up. If you heat it up, you're running into a real danger of maybe it exploding, which is one of its other great features. There's been a large number of large, but not a time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Shoot.
Okay, also keep this in front of the planning commission.
Okay.
Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, going to bring it back to the board and move on to our consent calendar. I get to this one. These items include routine, non-controversial matters and will be acted upon by the board by one roll call motion. A member of the board, staff, or public may request an item be pulled and considered separately. Board, let's start with the board. Any items to be pulled?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to pull 1.3, 1.4.
Hold on, Pete.
1.3,
1.4.
1.4, and 1.14.
Oh, confusing me here.
This is the way we write the agenda.
Look, that's something else. Bobby?
1.2, and Keith got
Hold on just a
the
second.
rest of it. Good job.
So 1.2 and?
That was it, he got the rest of it.
Okay. We'll dump the responsibility on Judy? Nothing. Okay, thank you. Staff, any staff in the room wish anything pulled? No? Okay. Okay, let's open it up to the public. Here we go.
I'd like to pull 1.6.
Thank you, Kay. Anyone else? Seeing none, bring it back to the board. I will entertain a motion for Kate, come on up.
Oh, so moved.
No, hold on. We're still getting the, I missed it too, don't worry about it.
Sorry, I
Good
seem to be
morning,
slow
that's fine.
today. 4.1, 4.5, and 4.9. Oh, that's right, it's your own one.
That's fine.
You can pull them in a
I
little
have
bit.
a mess today.
Thank you. You'll get to talk about it
You get to
later.
pull
Thank
them
you. Okay, any other public? Seeing none, I will bring it back to the board.
Second.
Motion first and a second. Susie, would you please both poll the board?
Supervisor Groves?
Aye.
Supervisor Moore?
Yes.
Supervisor Chadwick? Supervisor Hubbard?
Yes. Okay. Start with the consent item. Board of Supervisors 1.2. Approve a letter to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and the California Fish and Game Commission supporting the recommendations of the Trinity County Fish and Game Advisory Commission regarding bear license and tag regulations. There is no fiscal impact. Supervisor Chadwick.
Thank you, Chair. I pulled it primarily, the acronyms really threw me off. I had to look up a bunch of
Okay.
stuff. But I was hoping that you could just explain it in lay terms, basically how this came about. And
This came about because the advisory commission to this board felt that these are important items and they wish the board to move forward with backing what they would like and what they feel is correct for the county with the Fish and Game Advisory Commission. That's how it came about.
okay, I thought it was a really good idea.
We have about 12 commissioners on it now. They're very active.
So we filled the empty slots, and that was the other reason why I pulled it, because when I looked this up, on the website, it looked like there was vacancies, and I thought maybe you would encourage people to fill the vacancies.
Have been.
Okay,
And
great.
it is encouraged. I think we're past where we should be, but we made some adjustments to allow some additional commissioners to join.
Okay, great.
It's the, what is it, the second Wednesday?
It's
of every-
quarterly, I thought?
The second Wednesday of every other month here in this room, 7 p.m.
That was it. I was just
Okay.
hoping we have an opportunity to share that.
Thank you. They know more than I do. I don't know much about it.
I'll make a motion to accept.
Absolutely.
As written. Public comment first.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you. Going to open it up to public comment. It's item 1.2. Is there any public comment on that? Seeing none, bring it back.
Make a motion to pass 1.2 as it is written.
Thank
Second.
you. And I have first and a second, and I can just thank you. Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you, Bobby. Thank you, Susie. Moving down to Clerk of the Board 1.3, this is Keith's item. Find that the proposed license will meet the public convenience and necessity, and find no objection to the issuance of an off-sale beer and wine license to Weaverville Market located at 1480 Main Street, Weaverville. No fiscal impact. Supervisor Groves, what can we do for you on this?
I, again, will have to recuse off this item due to the alcohol part of this.
We'll miss you.
Makes it worth his while.
Yeah, seems that we found a problem with it.
I think we should add no health and sellers.
Okay, thank you for that comment. So I've read the item. Any other technical, gonna open it up to public comment. Anybody want to make a comment on this one? Nope. Okay, see those heads shaking. Thank you.
So moved.
I got a first and a second. Any other discussion? Nope. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. You were listening?
I can tell by your body language.
Okay. I'm transparent.
Here.
It's the beard, right? These glasses are open. Moving on to another Supervisor Groves item, 1.4, approve an agreement with California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, also known as CAL FIRE, to provide fire and emergency training services in fiscal year 2017-18. Supervisor Groves, what can we do for you?
Well, my question is, my rough math, which is probably close enough, since 2011, people in Trinity County have paid between $5.5 and $6 million into the fire fee. And in the fire fee, it says that this money can be used for fire education. And though I think this is a great thing that we need to be doing, can we not apply for this money through the fire fee fund and save the county general fund $13,000 and get at least 0.1% of our money back?
I don't know. I think the CAL FIRE fee is going away.
Well, it is going away, but there's
I know there's still
millions,
this.
$50 million or $100 million still in their accounts.
And I also think that they're not going to refund us anything,
They are not going to refund money.
just to upset everyone.
So it just, to me, this,
I can't answer that question. If the board would like to postpone this, we can inquire and find out.
That's a good idea.
Look to make a motion to table this.
Supervisor Chadwick also indicated she
Yeah,
had questions on this.
I didn't
Oh, I'm
do the
sorry.
math on that, but I was,
Thank you.
I see all the schedules and I see all the permits and I see all the things, but I didn't see any accountability of how and what they were doing with money. I felt like we were just giving the money and kind of letting it be. So I would concur with Supervisor Groves that in light of our tsunami budget, as we were told, that this would be one place that we could look at perhaps some saving.
Okay, so option would be to table and take a look at it, or to make a motion not to.
I think we should take a look at it and have CAL FIRE have an opportunity
Okay.
to respond.
Perfect.
So I would
Are
make,
you okay?
I would make a motion to table
Okay.
and give a direction to staff to talk to CAL FIRE to see if this would fall under their,
Okay, do you want your motion to be time sensitive? Next meeting, meeting after?
I don't think it needs to be time sensitive because I'm sure there's a time sensitive built up. The staff will get this back to us in a timely manner.
Okay, second?
Did you open it up?
We will.
Okay.
No, thank you.
I thought I did second it, I'm sorry.
Going to open it up to public comment, a little late. Public have any comment on this item? Seeing none, bring it back to the board. I have a motion and a second on the table in front of the board to table this item. Is there any further discussion? No? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. This item will be tabled. You didn't happen to pull 1.5?
I did.
Okay, good. I thought I heard it in there. Going to move on to 1.6. Ms. Graves approved the regular meeting minutes of September 6, 2017, the budget hearing minutes of September 13, 2017, the meeting minutes of September 15, 2017, the regular meeting minutes of September 19, 2017, as submitted by the deputy clerk. Yes, ma'am.
Kate Graves from Lewiston. I don't know if this is how you guys are planning on doing this now, or if it was a mistake, but the minutes don't contain any of the backup material. If you look at the minutes from like June, first part of July, you'll see, when you read through the minutes, you'll see backup material below it. These meetings and the prior meeting don't have those anymore. And so I'm wondering if that's a mistake, or you guys aren't going to do that anymore, put the minutes complete. Because as they stand now, the minutes are barely usable. All it says is who pulled. It doesn't even say who pulled. You can't tell if something was pulled unless you see that someone spoke. Their minutes have degraded in information quality for the public to the point of being non-usable. And if you're not going to put the backup stuff in them the way you used to, it makes it even more so. Also, this is kind of attached to the agenda item. Online, the archives are on one page, and that's fine. And now you have your new Novus agenda system, which apparently only goes back 6 months for posting them. So if people go to them and they see that they're not there, they go to the archives. And if they're not there, they're just missing. But what you have to do is search all those meetings in between middle May, to 6 months back. And I don't understand why you're doing that. It makes it a lot harder to find, and people who don't understand that aren't going to be able to find the information they need. And you really need to at least put the backup stuff you had on your minutes. That way people know what you passed when they're reading through your minutes. Several times you guys will have more than one option, and if you pass it, we don't know which option you chose necessarily unless it's in the backup. So that really needs to be there, and I appreciate you guys looking into that and fixing it. Thanks.
Thank you, Kay. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, going to bring it back to the board.
So moved.
Is there, okay. Do I have a second?
Yeah, I'd like to
And
make a comment on that.
We'll have discussion in a
Yes,
second.
second.
Okay, so I have first and a second. Any discussion? Bobby?
Yeah, so I had some IT problems last week and at our CRC, and apparently something happened. So I ended up using the website, and I found the same problem that she had. I was trying to find something, I think it was in the month of July. So I could not access it as well. So I I just want to say that I understand that frustration.
Okay, I know I had some problem, but it was at home, and it was, I had to attempt 2 or 3 times to download the entire agenda. So I don't know if the system was slow or just hiccup, but I noticed that our acting deputy clerk wishes to comment on this.
By default, the NOVA system only shows the last 6 months worth of agenda. I know that's something that Naomi is working with them to try and get that changed. So on our page, by default, it will show all of our past meetings as opposed to only the last 6 months.
Okay.
There is an option on the top of that page to customize your date range for when you're searching for, to be able to find the older, the meetings that are older than the last 6 months. They are there, they're just not default showing on the home page, which, again, I know Naomi is working with Novus to try and get that changed because it's not ideal.
And
It's not
I
friendly.
did bring it up to Naomi. July wasn't, it was after we switched, but the backup, as Kate presented, is not there as well. So both of those things, because sometimes you need, I just needed to refresh. Just for you, I ended up getting a malware at RC, so the IT took care of it yesterday.
Okay.
So just heads up, it might be why you're slow. So anyway, I have discussed it with Naomi, but I just wanted that part of it,
Perfect. That's a problem when logging onto the hotel.
yes.
We're fairly open.
So my question is the no backup part of the NOVA system? Or is this something we've done?
The documents are there, so the agenda is listed, all the backup is listed, and then the minutes are listed. So all of the information that has been presented prior to, during, or after a board meeting is in the system. We can look to make sure it's properly linked to each other, which I believe it is, but we will double check that.
Okay. So they're in separate categories, and you would have to go back and forth, is what you're saying?
That is correct. The minutes are just what occurred in the meeting. You don't include document backup, but all of the documents are there
Okay.
in the system.
If you could make sure that they link, that
Absolutely.
would be wonderful. All right, I'm done.
Excuse me, so you kind of changed the policy then?
Okay, we'll keep it down out there. We'll go outside and have a discussion if you wish. Okay, so I have a motion and second. Is everyone satisfied with the discussion?
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Moving on to hopefully item 1.14, Supervisor Groves, and approve amendment number 1 to the agreement with Shasta County Juvenile Rehabilitation Facility, increasing the maximum cost by $200,000 to provide out-of-county detention placement of juveniles. Total contract cost of $300,000 from the general fund. Good morning.
Good morning, Board. Chief Rogerson says apologies, couldn't be here today. He's at Juvenile Justice Commission training for
Great.
3 days.
Okay, Pete, what's up?
Well, my question is more of a broad question here. $200,000 out of our general fund, from a budget standpoint, is, well, kind of breaks the bank. So I'm not sure, this was more a question for acting CAO. What was the plan? This didn't come in front of any budget committee.
That's a good question. I'm not aware, I believe there was an aspect of it that was budgeted into our budget. The contract had not been executed. We're required to provide these types of services, and we had an ongoing agreement with Shasta County to do so. This is just the contract amendment to it. Is that?
That's correct. So the contract started last year, 16-17. It was, we had budgeted $100,000. It had a 2-year automatic renewal after that. Last year, we ended up expending $70,000. So we have increased it to a total of $300,000 over the total of 3 years, so that we don't have to keep coming back to the board
Right.
every time. So we've already budgeted $90,000 for this year for this, and it's been approved by the board. So, and next year we'll budget depending on what we end up using. So
Okay.
it's just a very fluid situation with, you never know how many kids you're gonna have in the hall at Shasta County, so.
I don't know if supervisors would be interested in what it would cost for us to open back up the juvenile detention facility and start housing those
Oh, my
juveniles.
goodness.
Oh, my goodness, I agree with you. And that would be our
It costs us
other option.
$115 a day per
Right.
youth at Shasta County.
And what were the title funds we lost several years ago, Title VII?
Yes.
Otherwise, we wouldn't have this cost.
So I misread, I misread the time period. So
Okay.
so I thought that was in 1 year, so I apologize for misreading that.
No problem.
So that makes more sense to me. So I have no more further questions.
If you want to misread it, look at me, I'll misread it. You have your excuse. I'm going to open it up to the public. Is there any public comment regarding this item? Seeing none, bring it back to the board. I will entertain a motion.
I will move to adopt 1.14.
Thank you. And I have a second. Hey, you're next, right?
Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion regarding this item? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you, board. Is that it for our consent? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it is. We're going to take a quick break before our 10 a.m. public hearings. We have about 15 minutes. I'd like to keep it down to, well, let's go for 15. Is that enough?
Yeah, I need to talk to staff.
Okay, that's enough. Thank you very much. It's 9:59. I'd like to get the session back in order regarding our 10 a.m. public hearings. I'm going to start a second early, at least open them up. Thank you for everyone who's also joined us. 10 a.m. public hearings. These items are noticed hearings and will be heard at 10 a.m. or as soon thereafter as possible. The public is invited to comment on the matter once the chair has opened the public hearing. Planning and zoning 2.1, conduct a public hearing to consider introducing and waiving reading of an ordinance which amends Trinity County Ordinance number 315 regarding cannabis testing facilities, unknown fiscal impact. And take it away.
Well, as we've been saying all year, this is one of the upcoming licenses that make up the permanent ordinance eventually. So this is testing. It is the only license offered by the state that you cannot have other license attached with it. The ad hoc recommended to the Planning Commission to be in zones C2, C3, and industrial. And it appears that the Planning Commission, well, it certainly has been before the commission, as all of you know, and they went with those zoning districts. The other thing I just wanted to make clear before I turn it over to Keith is that since the passage of SB 94, the medical marijuana regs that came out in April have not been, in essence, valid. So those went out the window since the passage of SB 94, with SB 94 combining both Prop 64 and MRSA, which makes up SB 94. We will see new emergency regs. They're predicting in late November. So I just didn't want the board or the public to get confused by these regs that are attached, and make sure that folks know the order of which those regs will come in. So with that, I will turn it over to Supervisor Groves for anything else.
I just do want to, very short, but The planning commission did take this down twice, I believe. First time they did approve HC zones.
Oh, that's correct.
And then the staff felt, through the zoning ordinance, felt that that wasn't a doable zoning, so it went back down for their more in-depth look, and then it came back up as C2, C3, and I. Pretty straightforward ordinance. It meets right along with our general plan and our zoning ordinance, and with that, I don't think I have anything else to say.
I have a question, technical-wise. How does this impact those zones with the chemicals and everything else, and also traffic? I assume most of the items, if they were tested, would be mailed in or dropped off, and then
Well,
it would be responded to either in an email or a letter.
through this ordinance, everyone would have to have their own use permit. And through that use permit, they would have to mitigate any traffic issues there are. In these 3 zones, the county is in fairly good shape. I don't see a lot of issues from a traffic standpoint, but if there are some of these in some strange areas, then they would have to do that process through the use permit.
Okay.
And that's where all the environmental mitigation will take place, is through the use permit.
Any comments from planning?
Use permit.
Okay, thank you.
Commission issues use permit.
I'm going to go ahead and open it up to the public.
Simple question, is there a map showing where all these zonings are?
I believe there is.
Where would you find it? Because I haven't been able to find it.
Thank you, John.
If you're like me,
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd recommend contacting the planning department, they'll provide that to you.
Kevin Massey in Hayfork. I talked to a couple people about setting up these, and they have buildings already, but at the planning commission, they were saying they didn't want them on the main drive-throughs, main streets, but everybody I know, that's where their existing buildings are already on, so I don't know if that's gonna be a major issue or not. I know the building is a part of the big cost of setting up one of those, and these people already have buildings, but I don't know if they meet your zoning requirement. Like the trading post in Hayfork, and Drake's down here, it's right on the main street, but it's not really there's really not many other places to do it. Anyway, that's all I have to say on that matter.
Thank you, Kevin. Any other public comment?
I'm Larry Fitzsimmons from Coffee Creek. Because we're going to be ushering in commercial growing, I would assume that testing and packaging facilities, things like that, would not be little mom and pop operations, but would be becoming larger. And so I would assume and kind of request that we have opt-out options similar to the commercial grows for this.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Any other comments? No fighting over this, Debbie. Come on.
My name's Debbie Loner from outside of Hayfork, and I would only like to offer that although, yes, all of the frontage that comes through Hayfork is commercial or industrial zoned, and yes, some of the larger buildings that are already there are along the main artery. However, there are ways to mitigate that. We don't want to see Hayfork being Pottville, USA, the minute you come in, and the only thing down the street besides the grocery stores and the dirt stores are testing facilities, smoke shops, and all of that. So there are places that are in the back portions of the 2 different lumber yards that have closed down. There are ways to place that farther back, or signage, What we want to do is make sure that it looks like any other industry and that we just don't turn Hayfork into one long stream of, here we go. And that's my input. There are places, but we need to be conscious of keeping the character of the town also intact. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie.
Jake Hackenrow, Hayfork. I think that these zoning, I think that it's great to see these businesses and this industry being put in the same type of places as it would fit zoning wise as if it was any other industry. I think that it would be great to see that same kind of momentum that this is a zone that was zoned by our county for generations now for heavy industrial or for commercial. I would hate to see the lumberyard here in Weaverville have to pick up and move off the main drag. I think we need to remember that we're not talking about a black market industry here. We're talking about a controlled, regulated industry. We have vineyards in this community. Now, if you were having a moonshine distillery, I don't think it would be appropriate right on the main road. But I think that our beautiful vineyards add to this economy and to this county. And I think that's absolutely fantastic. I also think that from a tax point, bringing these industries in, and I don't know what the answer is, but how are we going to mitigate the differences between, let's say, if Hayfork becomes Pop Town USA, and there is a massive amount of taxes coming in there, coming to our schools, coming to our roads, all of that. How is that going to work with areas that are deciding to opt out from that? That they don't want this in their backyard, but theoretically they want this on their roads and they want this in their schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. Any additional public comment? Are you our public comment usher today, John?
Well, he doesn't walk fast enough.
Okay, thank you. Oh, John. Yeah. Thank you, effort.
The ring isn't working too well. I've been reading this stuff for days and it just drives me nuts. So I have just sort of I like the bit about safety and security plans being in place. But my real question was fees. It talks about the program fee being per square foot. And I don't know square foot of what? Square foot of testing tables, square foot of buildings, square foot of parcel. I think this is just something I don't understand. And I think it needs to be clarified.
Okay, well, thank you. You made that note. Okay, thank you. Any additional public comment? Seeing none, going to bring it back to the board.
So I just want one clarification because I heard two opposing thoughts out there. Some believe it's not on commercial highway and some believe it is. So can you explain the designation of commercial highway and if
Sure.
it is and where it is? Thank you.
Highway commercial, that zoning district came up in the planning commission meetings, and the idea was on the second planning commission meeting that highway commercial would be that would be a zoning district that people would want to include to make the potential to establish a testing facility fairly equal in different regions of the county. For example, downriver, a lot of highway commercial. However, once we left the planning commission and we were going to bring this to the board, we started looking at the general description in the zoning ordinance of highway commercial. And it really is supposed to be catering to tourism and travel. And we thought, well, we can either rewrite the zoning district to fit testing facilities, or what we can do is direct people to rezone to an appropriate zoning district that includes uses that are consistent with the testing facility. And that seemed like the better. We took that to the planning commission and said, what do you think? So that would be the direction that we'd take.
So just to make it clear so everybody knows, if they're highway commercial right now, they'd have to rezone to include. So there is no highway commercial available at this time.
Correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure we all are on the same page.
And then the question regarding having a use permit will help vet out some of those concerns with somebody being on with highway frontage.
Yes, with the specific location site.
And it is per the building for square footage. So
Yes.
just if you want to.
Yes.
Make that a little clearer.
For the
Okay.
building itself.
Right.
And I just want to address a couple, and I'm sure Keith does too, some of the comments that were provided here. So, you know, this is a major undertaking for someone to provide a testing facility. It is not somebody who is going to have just a couple dollars in their bank account. Some very sophisticated equipment. It requires a lot of capital. We will be lucky if we get a testing facility in Trinity County. Also, it is also a requirement for those in the commercial cannabis. Our program and ultimately the state program all the product has to get tested. So this is a license. If someone chooses to set up a business here, it's here. Again, as Leslie and Keith both pointed out, the use permit will address a lot of the issues on a specific case-by-case basis. So just want to make that clear that this is, you're not going to see a lot of people running through planning to get a testing facility license, but it's available and it's needed for the industry and required by the state for product to be tested. So just want to give folks some context to what we're operating in.
So, yeah, I will expand on what Leslie had mentioned. This is the description of highway commercial. And so people get confused. Highway commercial is a zoning designation. It doesn't mean just every parcel along the highway that's commercial is highway commercial. So the purpose of this zoning district is to provide appropriate sites for the needs of recreation and business travelers. The district is intended to be applied to sites fronting state highways or along arterial roads that provide access to major recreation destination. Highway commercial areas should be designed so that most of the needs of the traveling public can be accommodated in one stop. So when we come across and look at this, we do have to follow the zoning ordinance, and clearly we would have to either redesign the zoning ordinance, which we will do at some point in the future, hopefully sooner than later, or, as what was mentioned, rezone properties to the appropriate zoning. So highway commercial is in the same overlay as C2, C3. Those are all legitimate in the same overlays. So making a case to change from a highway commercial parcel to a C2 or C3, for the most part, shouldn't be a horrendous task. And those zones in our zoning ordinance allow this sort of activity going on. So that's the feeling behind it. And again, I've said this before, zoning is not a static thing. Changing zonings happens all the time, everywhere, and that's why it's a flexible process. And then to kind of the question that Judy talked about that was brought up, is the use permit will mitigate issues. If you're in an area, you know, if it's signage, setbacks from the road, parking, waste issues, these will all be talked about in the use permit. So that's the time that neighbors and people in the community have the ability to come up and try to get problems that maybe arise mitigated.
Thank you, Keith. Anything else? I will entertain a motion.
All right, I will move to, what are we doing here?
It's public hearing.
Introducing the
Yeah,
reading?
we're just introducing.
So I'll move to introduce and waive the reading of ordinance of number 315.
Second for that choice, okay, no problem. Any other discussion? Nope. All those in favor signify by saying roll call vote.
Okay, I'll say roll call vote.
You got it. You got it. It passes. And I even noted that a second ago. Take it away, Susie.
Supervisor Chapman? Yes. Supervisor Morris?
Yes.
Supervisor Groves?
Aye.
Supervisor Finley?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Moving on to reports and announcements, 3.1, report from department heads. I know there's one out there. You don't. We won't force you, Leslie. Good morning, Noel.
Noel O'Neill from Behavioral Health. I just wanted to report on two things. One is the progress of Cedar Home peer respite. I just wanted the board to know that we are definitely on a good timeline to complete the project within the framework, and that we are also on budget. There will be one amendment coming to the board most likely in late December that will address a few issues that we have realized that require change orders. One of them being that the contractor and the roofers definitely recommended that we replace the HVAC units on Alpine House. This is really the time to do it, and they typically have a lifespan of about 10 years, and so we are going to use some of the maintenance revenue that we have for that intended project. But as we speak, the roofers are finishing the composition shingles on Cedar Home, so it's very close to being externally waterproof. I just wanted to also point out that there are a number of local contractors working on this project, including Trinity Heating and Air. Trinity Lumber provided all the materials. Sharp Electric is doing the electrical actually right now today, and as Scribner Construction has done all of the site work, foundation, water drainage, and they'll be coming back to do sidewalks and things. So we're looking at a completion of sometime in January, most likely. February 3rd is the date in the contract where it will be finished. We are intending to open the facility around May 1st, and we have tentatively set an open house, grand opening event that will be April 24th, and we're going to invite some of our funders and our local representatives to that event, and certainly we hope the board will want to attend, but we will make more details available as we get closer. We'll be hiring the staff the last quarter, and they will be receiving some very specific intentional peer support training so that they are really ready to do this kind of work. So we will have 5 new beds available for persons who need that kind of support. The other thing I want to report on is just a follow-up to the resolution. You might remember Chief Probation Officer Tim Rogers brought the Stepping Up project resolution to the board, and that was unanimously approved. One of the ways that the county is working on keeping mentally ill persons out of the jail is a program called Incompetent to Stand Trial. When a resident commits a misdemeanor and they are really not prepared to participate in their own defense due to a mental illness, typically what then happens, the Welfare Institution Code requires that the local mental health department restore that individual to competency. If it's a felon, then automatically they would be sent to Napa State Hospital by the court and paid for by the court. But the misdemeanor is the responsibility of the local county mental health. So to that end, Behavioral Health invited psychologist Jay Holden from Mendocino County, who has developed an in-jail competency program. And he did a presentation to the judges, to the chief probation officer and the health officer from the jail, and it was very well received. He did a training for about 12 of the behavioral health staff who would actually be the persons going into the jail with the curriculum to restore the individual to competency so they ultimately can participate in whatever charges have been brought against them. And this is a really big step because in the past, these kind of individuals could linger in jail for a while. And Jay Holden, the psychologist who did the training, has a pretty good track record of less than 2 months to restore the individual. So we're really excited about this, and it's just going to be one little piece of the Stepping Up program, and we'll be doing other things to try to alleviate mentally ill persons ending up in the jail. So,
Okay. When I went to the Stepping Up program in Sacramento, jail was involved in that. Were they involved in this training also?
yes, they were
invited?
involved the
Okay,
entire
perfect.
day. Ron Allison,
Thank you.
and he is also very excited about the program, and we are going to be working just
That's the whole idea, is to
closely
get everybody
together.
involved and working together.
Thank you.
Thank you, Noel. Well, go ahead. Sorry about
Go
that.
ahead, Bob.
Are we doing this as a standalone county, or is this a regional effort?
This is a standalone county, but when Jay Holden left Trinity, he went to Shasta County and gave the same training to them the next day. So each county will do this on their own. It gets very complicated to try to do it as a regional model because of it's hard to just get the judges alone in a meeting because they're so busy, and so we're doing it as a standalone.
Don't go away.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I have a
They got away from me.
quick question, unrelated, but good information. This relates to the Helena fire and the folks who are going through some very traumatic times with the loss they've experienced. I assume your staff is been available for those folks as they come through your door if needed. I don't know if your staff's participating in our local assistance center. I know probably we will see another one come up as well, but I'm still getting some calls, and I think your department's probably very valuable right now for folks trying to process the loss that they're going through.
Yeah, absolutely. The staff from TCBHS did assist in the shelters. We've done a number of counseling interventions with families who have lost their homes or issues arose because of that. And one of our staff has been the head of distribution of donations, tracking, and also assisting the recovery team in the planning for recovery. So we've been very involved, and it's actually been a privilege to do that.
Is there a smaller team within your team that is just specifically helping folks who are in need of your assistance through your department, or they just need to come through the normal process?
Well, certainly they can come through the normal process, but if there's anyone, and we have actually met with individuals, and this is, it's free, there's no charge. It could be county employees who are having an issue because of this, and it may just be residents, but the intervention is available during business hours, and if there's a crisis, we're certainly available after hours.
Great. Thank you to you and your staff for helping in this issue.
Thank you, Noel. Any other staff?
Good morning, Letty Garza, Health and Human Services, and OES. I just wanted to give the board an update on some of the recovery efforts happening with the Helena fire. First of all, I know Rick's here. I'm sure he'll give a more specific report out on the operations, but the Department of Toxic and Substance Control is done doing their going through the properties. We have established our recovery team, as I reported before. We do meet weekly. We have different levels of functions in that recovery team. In the operations side, Rick is pretty much managing that area. We have a finance team, and we have a long-term recovery team that we're developing that's going to be more specific to case management, working with the actual families and working with them on housing. Behavioral health has been providing counseling services when requested, and the request for a second local assistance center will be scheduled soon. So I just wanted to report out on that. I was contacted by OES that the fire management assistance grant people will be coming to Trinity the week of October 16th, and that will start the process of submitting or preparing to submit the applications for reimbursement with all of the entities that have been involved with this incident. So we will be helping coordinate that as well. Let's see, of course, the Small Business Administration is here. They've been located at the Performing Arts Center, helping those individuals who need some financial assistance, some low interest loans that they can apply for. And I think that's all I had for their fire recovery. On a Health and Human Services report, I just wanted to let the board know that we are approaching flu season. We are scheduling our flu clinics. We will be having our drive-through flu clinic in Weaverville October 27th, and they will be scheduled throughout the county. We have Trinity Center, Hayfork, Higham Palm, Junction City, and Lewiston. So there'll be 2 flu clinics in Weaverville, and of course Mondays from 9 to 5:30 is our general clinic that folks can come in and get their shots during that day on Monday. I do want the board know also, we have created a healthcare collaborative, and in that healthcare collaborative, we have created a opioid coalition. Ann Ligorio is the primary contact for that, but I am assisting her as well. And I know there was an article that came out in the Trinity Journal about the concerns, how Trinity County has a high rate of prescriptions of opioids. So that is something that is high on our radar to see what we can do to help that prevention and education. And I know Supervisor Chadwick had provided information also on the coast-to-coast prescription services, so we will be exploring that information too. So that's pretty much it. I do need to let you know, and you will be getting some staff reports requesting some agreements that we'll be submitting for our eligibility system, and social services is going to be merging with LA, and it's now going to become called CalACES. It used to be, it is still called C4, but it will be transitioning into a CalACES system, which is a huge statewide merge effort. So you will be getting that information in the near future. And that's all I have. And if there's any questions, I'm here.
Thank you.
I do have a question. Speaking of vaccinations, Hefe,
Oh,
I
yes.
guess 2 counties are getting clobbered with it.
Yes, thank
South
you,
of
Judy.
us.
Yes, Supervisor Morris, that was on my list, I forgot to mention. Yes, we do have Hep A doses available. We did have a positive result of a Hep A incident here, and so that was linked into Southern California Hep A. So we do have that available. They do come in 2 doses. The first dose is conferred to provide a 90% immunity, and the second dose can increase it up to a 98% immunity. So it's your choice whether you want to have 1 or 2. And yes, we do have doses for that as well. So
I have another quick follow-up. I know you were offering tetanus shots as well. Now, what are the hours for people to get tetanus shots?
Monday, 9 to 5:30.
That's your whole vaccination kind of day?
Yes.
Great. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Director.
On the operations side of the fire, we have been mainly, we opened up a Cal Recycle a center for people to come in and ask questions, and find out what's coming up next. It's located next to the hardware store, Pulaski's hardware store, and it's open 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and then some early morning hours on Saturday. We have 84 properties that were affected by the fire, and that was structures that were essentially, there's only a few structures that were damaged. For the most part, everything was destroyed. But a lot of the properties had multiple structures on it, so when it came down, the 130 structures you always hear actually came down to 84 parcels that were affected. So we need 84 right of entries to have Cal Recycle come and clean up. Right now, we've gotten 21 as of last night, and I signed 3 more this morning. So they are coming in, and we are moving forward. Again, it's important. The date is October 13th, where we need to have everybody signed up in the program. After that, they need to either have a plan, and we need to be aware of it, or they need to be signed up with Cal Recycle, because then we'd have to go and look at taking action to have it cleaned up before the rains get here, which means essentially we have no time, means abatement, and then I move Cal Recycle in to clean it up. That's an expensive process. That's something that we definitely would like to try to avoid, because it's something that, I don't like to ever have to tell people, here's what you have to do. But with winter rains coming up, it's something that we don't have an option for, because again, the debris that's on there is still, it's, for better words, yucky stuff, and we don't want it in the river, and so we have to take an action.
Thank you.
I do have a couple things. First of all, a shout out to the Department of Transportation. That seems like they've had one situation after another, and as proud as we are of all the employees that have stepped up to the plate, Department of Transportation had more than their share of challenges. So I just want to say thank you to them from all of us for that. I have been contacted by people that have been in the burn, and there's some confusion. I think I sent you an email. Did you get that? About maybe perhaps putting a specific packet together for the burn people with their fees separated, and like we do for the cannabis, just to think about expediting it.
Yeah, I had emailed when I got your email, I forwarded that on to the building official.
Thank you.
And asked him to make sure we have packaging. I believe he already does. I just hadn't heard back from him yet. So I know what you were asking for, and we'll have some.
I hadn't talked to you yet, so thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ray. Any other staff? Going to move on to report from County Administrative Officer, non-appointed interim.
Thank you. From the admin officers, nothing to report. I did attend RCRC this week with the chair and Supervisor Chadwick, which was a lot of interesting things for the county.
Okay. Report from members of the Board of Supervisors. I'll go ahead and start. Out-of-county travel was simply last week, starting Tuesday to Friday. I attended RCRC, and if anybody cares, our basket did a good job. I want to thank Kirby Rhodes, and I don't know if anybody else is here. You're a smash as usual. We brought in quite a bit of money for about 5 different charities in Tehama County. That's it. That's my out-of-county travel. Judy, Bobby, anybody want to step up?
Sure. On the 20th and 21st, I was introduced to TMC through Keith, and that was fascinating. I think the first day was 12 hours or something like that. I left after 12 hours. I'm just baffled. On the 22nd, Trinidad had a training that was incredible. I do want to report to the board that LCC, which is a committee I am on currently, has merged with Trinity Coalition for Active activity and nutrition. And the new one is Partnership in Action for Trinity Health. It's called PATH. And I've already given this information to Naomi because the one did not have a board of supervisors and the other one did. And so I'll remain on the board with LCC as a PATH. So on the 26th was the TCRCD. It was a pretty big meeting. And then, of course, the 27th through the 29th in Tahoe at RCRC, my first one. And just a plug for the Harvest Festival that was in Weaverville on Saturday. It was great. The ad hoc cannabis, I'll get to that in a minute. Angela Riggs, the Mountain Valley School, the high school over in Hayfork, most of it has been closed due to the mold. The campus was supposed to be reopened yesterday with portables. I haven't gotten verification, but on the 10th, which is next Tuesday, they're going to have a district representative to update us on the mold. And it's also a candidates night. So it's a real important night at the high school, 6 o'clock. Then also, I'll just jump into the ad hoc cannabis. I talked to, or actually corresponded with Shanna White. We have to have the date for the tax for the June ballot on February 20th. So I would like to go forward and to the different districts and do surveys on what they would like to, what their thoughts are, and start moving forward and at the town hall gathering information.
For the ad hoc cannabis?
Cannabis tax,
Cannabis.
yes. So we have to have it into
Right.
Shanna by February 20th, so I'd like to go forward moving through it. Okay, that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Oh.
Nope, not it. No, oh, okay.
I'll do it.
Okay.
You have.
I reviewed this one. And I did get this, so thank you. Really no out-of-town travel. I would have joined all of you, but the schedule didn't allow. There's still a lot of work going on with the fire. As Letty mentioned, SBA is in town until October 18th, and they offer some really great low-interest loans for homeowners, even landlords who lost rental property. The deadline to apply is November 27th, and I met with the representative from SBA, and he said even if there's folks on limited income, please go see them. Don't let that limit you. You just never know what size of loan you still might be qualified for. And as Supervisor Chadwick reminded me that there's this hazardous waste collection day coming up in the county on this Saturday, 9 to 2, for both Weaverville, Hayfork, and the Mad River sites. So that is it until we get to our ad hoc.
No out of county, but I do want to thank Supervisor Chadwick for the TMC. She sat there and wide-eyed and trying to figure out what was going on like the rest of us, and so she did a great job in soaking it all in.
Okay, going to report out on our ad hoc committees. California state cannabis legislation, it's all moving through. Did you have anything specific?
Yeah, just what I mentioned earlier, we're going to see emergency regs come
Right.
out late November. We wish it was sooner for everybody involved, but that's the latest
And
update.
that'll come directly from those three regulating agencies. Okay. Permanent commercial cannabis ordinance, anything to report out on that? You don't have to.
Yeah, actually,
Uh-oh.
the SEPA notification was noticed last week. So the process on that will be people have time to make their comments on that, and then planning staff will answer those comments and we'll move forward.
Okay, and Bobby was kind enough to cover the commercial cannabis taxation, and moving on to new jail detention. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Go ahead. I thought I heard it all.
Oh, no.
And that's
Good. So last Thursday, the Planning Commission wrapped up the nursery license item, and introduction of manufacturing was before them. And they will hear that again that you'll look for the nursery license ordinance come before the board shortly. And then not too many lessons left to wrap up, and then the whole package done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's not done yet.
We're close.
New jail detention facility, I haven't been updated on anything.
I have not even.
Okay, so nothing about it. Going to move on to county matters. These items include non-routine or controversial matters and are listed alphabetically by department. A member of the board or staff may request that an item be heard out of order. I'm going to go first. I would like to request that Mr. Meager, our VSO, be heard first so he can get back to his important job, which he handles very well. Are there any other requests?
I think since most of the audience is here for commercial cannabis, this is my wild guess.
Okay.
If we could move that up sooner, it would be nice.
Number 2. Okay, that's a deal. Staff have any others?
No, not.
Okay. I'm going to read auditor, wait,
I'm
what
gonna
number are
maybe-
you?
He's on 411, 011.
Chair,
Yes.
after the Veteran Service Operation Plan, maybe we could put right behind it Director Garza's item of emergency operations, job description. That should be a quick matter. And then have cannabis follow.
Okay. Does the board have any problem with that?
I do not, I recommend we put both the Director Garza's up there so that she can go back to work.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, correct, sorry.
Okay, 4.7 and 4.8.
And then-
4.9.
And then maybe after that, have Director Tippett's item, so he can get on with his day.
No, he's going to be,
He's going to be around. no
Oh,
matter
he's gonna be
what.
around, okay.
Yeah, he's gonna be
Sorry,
around.
Rick.
Okay, so we're going to start out with Veteran Services, 4.11. Approve the Trinity County Veteran Service Operations Plan for fiscal year 2017-18. There's no fiscal impact. You're free today, huh? No dollars. I'm giving you ignorance, Patrick, you know that ain't I.
So I'm here for my annual visit with you again, and the format of that ops plan is pretty much the same. What I'd like to do is talk a little bit about what's new and what's different, and some of the recent activities we've been involved with the fire. For the first time since I've been working as a veteran service officer, we actually have CalVet and the VA using the same data for a head count for our veterans in Trinity County. So the last couple of years, that number has been changing anywhere from 1,380 and 1,500. So we're settling on 1,523 in the county. Data that I've crunched in the office over the last few years indicates that about over 95%, 97% of the veterans in the county are men. And understanding that you can't go into service until you're 18 years old, when you drill down into that data, what it tells us is that 27% of the men in Trinity County over the age of 18 are veterans. Okay. Some other data that's important is, and this matches with what CalVet is projecting, is over 50% of the veterans in Trinity County are over the age of 50. So that starts to paint a picture of our veterans, when they served, what they've been exposed to, and for me, it really points out that I need to be focused in with our veterans on health care issues. That's a big deal. We've got a lot of guys that are Vietnam veterans. An example, this year I have referred 7 veterans for Agent Orange physicals. That's a specific physical that, very thorough, and if there's any illnesses that are related to exposure to Agent Orange, they get identified and we can do a claim for them with that. So we're still doing that. These guys are in their 60s, a lot of them now. Some of the other data we received is there's 304 veterans that are receiving either a non-service connected pension or they're receiving disability payments for a service-connected condition. The dollar figure for that income to these veterans from the VA on an annual basis is close to $6 million going in their pockets. We have 407 vets that are using VA healthcare in the county. That's been pretty stable over the last few years. I have an arrangement, a partnership with the director of the VA healthcare clinic in Reading, where I try and recruit as many as I can and have them sign up for VA healthcare. That partnership paid off pretty dramatically when we had the fire in the Helena Junction City area. I was able to get an email off to Don Black, who's the administrator, and gave him the zip code number of that area, and I said, please determine what vets you have out there and make contact with them to see if they need any kind of assistance. Now, my number was 30, his was 32. They contacted everybody. There were 7 bad phone numbers. They had to leave messages with 10. They contacted the rest, and there were 4 that were burned out and needed emergency pharmacy assistance from the VA. So all that was taken care of. If you'll notice in the plan, I'm still referencing the CalVet 3-year-old strategic plan. Now, I contact them every year, and I asked them if you're, where you at with a new strategic plan. Said, we're not anywhere with it. And I said, well, what are you going to do? He said, we don't know yet. So I'm surmising that a lot of this is connected as to what's going to roll out from the Department of Veterans Affairs in Washington, D.C. And that's the big question mark at this point in time. Still going twice a month to Hayfork. It's productive. Example, last week I did a disability claim for a Navy veteran over there. I'm now a member of the Superior Court Probation Department Treatment Court Planning Committee, which is in the early stages. My piece to this is California Penal Code 1170.9, which is a specific veterans deferral program that can be worked with the court and the probation department. So I've done one of these all the way through. We don't see many vets in the jail. There may be some that are booked in at night, but typically released the next day. So it's not even enough time for me to get with them. The number of open claims and appeals in the county is declining. 2 reasons. The Veterans Benefits Administration, where 3 years ago you could reliably predict it's going to be at least 10 months for your claim to be processed and awarded, has revised the processing of claims. I had 1 claim for a veteran here in Weaverville that was awarded in 2 months. So we're seeing a decline in these number of open claims. The other reason for that is we only have like, what, 12, 13,000 military deployed in Afghanistan and Iraq now. And so the number of claims coming in is declining also. The last 2 years when I was here, I was talking about we're this close to having electronic filing of claims. So we implemented that last year, and I'm very disappointed with it. It's not working very well. It's limited to one type of claim only, and it can only go to CalVet. The other problem is a hardware piece, and there's no fix for it, and it's for the electronic signature. And while you could get an electronic signature on a pad that looks like this, when it shows up on the claim itself, it's about this big, and there's no fix for that. So I've done about 4 or 5 of them, and I've just gone back to the regular process of printing out the forms, have them sign them, stick them in the mail, and it's working just as well. Veterans Choice. Veterans Choice, funding and politics. Hayfork veterans have been encouraged by the clinic in Reading for the past few months to go on the Veterans Choice Program to be seen by a local physician at the Hayfork Clinic. Now, the problem with this has been the funding aspect. And initially, this was designed to help spend some of this money that was sitting there. And then they overspent, so they said, okay, you can't do that now. And Congress just passed $2.6 billion additional funds for Veterans Choice, and that was to take it to the end of the year. And they're not sure if they're going to be able to make it to the end of the year with this, so the whole thing is kind of like this. That program was designed to be a 2-year program, and it was a political fix for the problems that surfaced down in Arizona. The VA secretary would like to modify that and extend it and roll another batch of money that they use for outside care, emergency room services and so forth. But he's got to work that, going to have to work that with Congress. I think all in all, we're doing okay, taking care of the vets, working the emergency stuff as we needed to. I saw 7 veterans at the local assistance center. I was there for 2 days, provided some assistance. We got the BFW involved. They helped out with some financial stuff. And got any questions? I'd be happy to take them.
Just a real quick question from me. Out of 1,503 veterans, is that roughly 8 or 9?
1,523.
23, okay.
Yeah.
Do you have an estimate of how many of those you touched or reached out to, or that use you?
I started a new tracking process last year that's in the VetPro program.
Okay.
I've had over 500 contacts.
Fantastic.
Okay,
Perfect.
and that's everything.
That's exactly what I'm interested in.
Yeah,
Just as long as
everything.
they know you're there,
Yeah.
because every vet I talk to, I mention your name
Yeah.
and explain where you are, and then it clicks in and they go, oh yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Don't change anything.
I mean, that covers all kinds of stuff.
Okay.
Basic questions about this, that, the other thing, driver's license stuff, there's
Right.
all kinds of stuff.
Okay. Any other technical questions?
Patrick, as always, thank you for your great work. We're lucky to have you. And I just want to point out that the previous department heads that gave reports, there are a lot of departments who are doing double duty, helping with the fire recoveries on top of their normal work. Whether it's Rick's department, Letty's department, and of course the sheriff department had their role. They're doing double duty, so thank you again for helping our community.
I'll be there tomorrow for my shift.
Okay. And thank you for Hayfork also. That's very valuable. No other technical questions? Okay, going to open it up to public comment regarding BOARD-OF-11. Is there any public comment regarding this item? Seeing none, bring it back to the board.
I move to approve the Veteran Service Operation Plan 4.11.
Okay, thank you. And I have a second from Morris. Okay. those in favor, or any other discussion? Didn't seem like it. Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you very much. Thank you. Look forward to seeing you next year. I'll see you in Q4, don't worry. I could move on to moving things around. Letty, Health and Human Services, 4.7, pursuant to Trinity County Code Section 2.0.410, authorize hiring a social worker at range G, 1A4, step E in the Health and Human Services Department, Child Welfare Services Unit, effective October 1st, 2017. Approximate cost and salary and benefits for social worker 2 at step A is $5,261, and step E is $6,236. Director.
Okay.
So,
Well, as per county code, we do need to comply and request your approval, because anytime we want to hire someone above the A step, we need your approval. And in this situation, we have an individual who has extensive experience in child welfare. She worked in behavioral health as well as a substance abuse counselor, and has worked closely with our families and children in that department. So with that extensive experience, we felt it was appropriate to allow her to go to that E step. And this is a lateral move. It's not that we're, giving her something higher than she already has. This would just allow her to maintain the same salary.
thank you. Any questions from the board? Okay, going to open it up to public comment regarding 4.7. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, bring it back to the board. Anybody like to push this forward or kill it?
I'll second.
Okay, I've got a first and second. Thank you, they didn't choose the kill it item. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you, board. 4.8, adopt a revised job description for the position of Emergency Operations Manager. No fiscal impact.
Okay. Well, this item, as the board knows, the board approved that the movement of the OES department be moved over to HHS from the Sheriff's Office. So in order for us to recruit for that position, we did need to update the job specifications to reflect that the position is in Health and Human Services, and it would be under the direction of the Director of Health and Human Services. So I did work closely with OES also to ensure that the job specifications and the description was appropriate. And we did make some minor edits, but overall it is good to go if you approve the changes.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Okay, open it up to the public regarding item 4.8. Any public comment?
Hey, Grace from Lewiston. I was just curious when the OES was moved from the sheriffs, from the people that were doing it before, to Health and Human Services.
Okay, that's it. Thank you, Karen. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Is there anything else? Entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve item 4.8 as written.
Okay, first and second, and regarding 4.8, to accept the revised job description for the position of Emergency Operations Manager. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you, buddy. The next one is going to be Planning and Zoning, 4.9. No one's yelling at me. Must be right on track here. Waive the reading of and enact an ordinance which amends Trinity County zoning ordinance number 315 by creating section 28 commercial cannabis cultivation regulations, and it was introduced September 19th, 2017. Unknown fiscal impact. Good morning. Yeah, this is
Continuation. Madam Chair, this would be the second reading of the ordinance. The changes that were made during the public hearing and that were adopted during the first reading are incorporated within. By doing this, it would enact the ordinance. It would then have 30 days in which it would be published in the newspaper, and then it would go into effect 30 days thereafter.
Okay, does the board have any questions regarding this item?
I have a couple of clarifications, some are just typos.
This is it.
Your cover page, it says SB 837, I think it's at 94. So
That's part of, that came out of, I think it's spun out of SB 94, or 84 as well.
Okay, it says 837.
No, that is part of it too.
Okay.
So, but maybe
Yeah.
she
Let's
needs to
clean up
include.
language.
Yeah. But maybe to your point, SB, what am I saying, 94?
Yes.
Needs to be included as well, I think.
There is reference.
Yeah, to 94
On the next page.
on the next page. And
Next page on.
9.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes you use different acronyms, different things, but just,
So that's correct, because that is
Okay.
clean up language to 94. And some other detail.
and so
Is that correct?
your page 4 of 13, I didn't see the SB 94 there either. So item F, unless I'm just missing it.
No, well, it's
Under
listed
Under my
under
cursor, I know, but sometimes you do one, sometimes you do the other, so I was just clarifying it.
94.
It's the same, the cursor is SB 94, happy to add
Yeah,
that in.
sometimes you do one and sometimes you do the other, just want to make sure that.
Okay, and just to make it clear, these are changes that we can,
So we cannot make any substantial
Right.
changes or anything that changes, but if there are typographical or clarification that does not change the intent, we will put those in here.
So on page 5, under U, again, it's a homeschool issue because you have private, which homeschool falls under. And last time, I thought we cleaned it up, but unless you have it somewhere else and I just didn't see it.
Margaret addressed homeschool last time, and there was,
Yeah, but that's what I'm not seeing.
no, I don't think there was anything to.
Right, homeschool is not included under this, it's not included by the state.
Right.
If you would like us to clarify that, put that
Well,
language in, that's-
homeschool can be classified as private school, so that, perhaps I did not make that distinction clear enough last time, and I apologize, but homeschool would be considered private, and when it says private, then if a farmer is homeschooling his own child, you're in conflict with the ordinance. So,
do you, I need some clarification here also. Do you have to go to public school or private school in order to work a homeschool?
you can go online and get your own school
Okay.
credential, as a individual.
And that
Or
was-
you could
would
be
that be-
under a umbrella who is at a different location, but you get all their materials, they're your admin and all that. You're a homeschool, but you're considered a private school.
Okay, I'm just wondering whether just by getting that credential and either homeschooling, schooling through the public school or through a private school or through one of the others that are around, that would be covered as homeschooling, because you still have to participate in some type of credential or school or private school in order to homeschool.
I'm in
And that's-
agreement with you,
yeah.
but what my concern is that when you have the definition of a school, including private school,
Okay.
and then you have limitations on how the proximity of a farm is,
Got
and
it.
you're homeschooling your own
Got it.
child on your own farm.
Okay.
There's nothing to protect the individuals providing homeschool for their child.
So if we put excluding homeschools in there, that would.
No, I think you wanted to include
No,
home.
we would have to exclude it in order
Okay.
to allow a person to homeschool
Okay.
their own child, even though it's under a private school.
I understand, and that was the intent of this, we had this discussion last time.
Yes,
so we
that is
cleared it.
correct. So I'm just clarifying it.
Because it does say an institution, and homeschool is not an institution, so the clarity there is, I'm fine with putting the clarity in, but I don't see it as a change in any shape.
It would not constitute change.
4A, the Trinity County Water Works #1 is back in, but then later on page 9, on 7BI, excuse me, about the third, it looks like it's back in the carve-out and on the third dot. So I just wanted to verify that.
Seriously. Okay, I got 4A, now where do we go to?
Yeah.
Page 9, item 6, DI, and the third, where it's indented with the third bullet.
Correct.
So it contradicts each other.
It contradicts. So just to make it clear, because I know we have a lot of conversation.
Oh, actually, it doesn't.
Yeah, I don't think it does.
Because we include the cutoff date.
So they are separate. The one in the, on page 9 references the cutoff date, which you have the application invite to be allowed to cultivate in that section.
Okay, so the way I'm reading it, it looks like the carve-out is being, the waterworks was eliminated from the carve-out, and it looks like it's being added back in. Now, are you reading it that way, or?
The way I am reading it is that it is still a portion of the carve-out. However, if you have your water board license by the date that's specified, they're allowing the growth in that section, essentially grandfathered in that
So
section.
there was 3 specific separate things last time, and I think there's confusion. The waterworks cutout, carve-out, was no longer a cutout. That's a standalone. Waterworks is now available if you have ag land, period. There was 30 additional permits that were on top of the 500, and then there was a lift. I requested 6 months. Mrs. Morris said 90 days in order for people to have the suspension of the November 2016 date removed, so they would not be bumped to the back of the line. So there were 3 specific things. But the way I'm reading it is that the carve-out is only open for a specific amount of time. And so that was, I think, that is not my intention. The carve-out, the waterworks was a standalone and it's back in. But because there had been a time frame in which a lot of people did not do an NOI, that would have eliminated them. So there was like this time period specifically for them to get it going.
I understand what you're saying, and you are reading it correctly. When this was how my understanding was that it was voted on, so I turned it back over to the board to give me direction on how they believe it was articulated.
So, bear with me, I'm just going to reiterate kind of what you're saying. We added the 30, and that is reflected on page 8 under the registration phases. They had, I believe, till the 90 days to apply for the water board, or enroll, I should say. And then the extra 30, they were going to, in theory, get penalized for not applying, so they could start applying immediately as well, as long as they had that enrollment of the water board. And their property certainly was eligible, if their property was eligible. Does that make sense?
I think you're making it more sounding of how it's reading. So there's 3 specific things.
Yeah.
The water district, #1, is no longer a carve-out, period. We can agree on that?
Well, it's carved out until end of the 90 days.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. That's not how.
That's what we discussed.
Okay, so I'm saying that correction needs to be made, just like we just made the homeschooling correction. The carve-out was a standalone. It was back in. Then it was also the 30, and then it was the open enrollment I asked for 6, and then we negotiated to 90. I think somewhere it says November, but it should be December.
Right. It was November for the other.
Right.
November 30th, so it's.
For the past, but not going forward.
No, it was November 30th for the other new carve-outs.
Correct.
Oh,
And including Waterworks District 1.
okay.
My understanding was December 31st.
December 31st for that? Okay. And that, again, I can clarify and go back to the minutes. And as you were discussing it, we took very detailed notes on it. What I understood the board to have voted on, and I can go back again and review the minutes, but or the tape, was that the Waterworks District 1 would continue to be a carve-out. However, there would be an exception that allowed individuals who have their water board license by December 31st, 2017, they could apply for and be eligible to receive a license.
Up to 30.
Up to 30 that have been additionally designated.
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds
So
like
so I'm making a correction, like I'm making the correction on the homeschool that we thought we had done correctly, and now we're fixing it. I'm making the correction that the waterworks, the intention was that it was no longer a carve-out.
my problem is it was not voted that way by your fellow
That's
board
not-
members. So it's not a
How she
correction.
repeated it was what we
Right.
agreed on.
And I'm saying it's written wrong, is in my recollection. So,
Well, that's how, that was the
I
discussion.
understand, so
and
let's make the correction, like we just made the correction with the homeschool.
Well, there really wasn't a correction with homeschool because we just made a clarification to
Well,
make,
okay, so let's make a clarification that whatever you want to call it, that the water district carve-out is no longer a carve-out.
But it is.
but it is.
And I'm saying that was incorrect in how it was.
It is being treated differently than any other area, so therefore, in fact, it is a carve-out because we have to designate what area gets special or different treatment. So, after this date, we're allowing them to grow in that district, but they have to meet these requirements to grow that we all agreed upon. And then if they don't meet that, then they cannot grow in that district. So therefore, it is a carve-out, where other districts, we don't have that requirement.
I understand how you're getting there, but that isn't what I said, and that's not what I thought we agreed on. And I believe that even the people that were in the audience, and even the way Sally Morris wrote it up in the paper would be similar to how I said it. The Waterworks District, and I specifically said if you have agricultural property in the water district, that you should not be penalized. And I did not cap that as a date. The only date capped was for the 6 months that I was asking to retrofit the people that had not gotten the NOI, so they would not be, if there was more than 30 permits, that they would not be penalized for not having done it by November of 2016. I understand how it's confusing, but those were 3 separate items.
So I just want some clarity here. You believe that we voted that anybody with ag ground in this district can grow anytime?
If they're zoned correctly and the land use, yes, that's what I believed we voted on.
You brought it
That's
up.
not my recollection in
You
any
raised the
way,
issue,
shape,
but we
or form.
didn't incorporate that part into our changes. You did raise that issue, though.
And it was, this is what we voted on.
So, in this one, it doesn't matter if you have ag or not.
Right.
You have to meet the other requirements, but
I mean, if you have ag and you're enrolled by December 31st, you're good to go.
With your water board.
Right. Sorry, thank you, with your water board.
I don't know how to express it any differently than what I've already said. My understanding and what my intent was clearly in my mind then as well as now, and there was a lot of discussion on this. And so I understand the confusion, but the water district carve-out was to be eliminated and not be a carve-out. And I know we said it multiple ways, so basically what I'm saying is if you're in the water district and your land is eligible, that it should be eligible. And I brought up the personal property rights of the people in that. And so I understand there's confusion, but I'm asking for a correction.
I don't know if we can make that correction, to be honest with you.
I do not believe we can. The motion was made by Supervisor Morris based on what I'm understanding her to have intent to be. The way it is written is what was voted on. Which means if we were to modify it, we'd have to start over with a first reading again, wait for the meeting, do a second reading, and then we'd have 30 days from that point. So we can do that. It's the board's pleasure how you want to proceed. It just would require an actual substantive change to what we have before you.
And you were second on that.
It's a huge substantive
Yeah,
change.
so-
That's the
so
only reason
if we-
it can't be made today.
Well, we can make it, and then we just start over with the first and second reading, is what she said. So,
I didn't, okay, stand up and give your,
Is the board advocating for people who are 2 years late on the water board?
okay,
to
you're
now still be able to be
making
part of it?
a different comment, Jake.
I'm just clarifying.
I understand.
I actually have a different question.
Tear it
Haven't
down.
opened up public
I'm
comment
sorry,
yet.
I will open up public comment once we decide to, and trust me, I understand you wish to
I'm a little
comment.
confused on what she's asking.
I understand, we're working through, that's all, sorry.
well, I have nothing more to add.
Okay.
I think that there's a way possible to put it back in there, and I would request that we do it in the intention of what was said at the last meeting and what I thought had been even recorded.
Okay, hold, okay.
Chair, if I may.
Yes, you may.
One of the things I'd like to point out is benefit of that action. The thing that's providing the people to be allowed for applying for the additional permits is the 30 that are above the 500 cap. So even if we did make that change, it would receive no benefit to that area unless licenses were to become available.
Right.
But there's a waiting list for it already. So the fact that 30 were added is what creates the benefit for the change that was made.
Okay.
I believe that was said, if not exactly like that, very similar. And the 30 in what I said was because people had that cutoff time limit and they weren't even made aware of it. So this was to take the penalty that they had already received and kind of equal it out. There are a few people that have received an NOI already, and then the rest didn't think they would even pay the money to get it because they were ineligible. So they're starting the process over at the beginning. And so because of that, that was what the request for the 30 additional. But it was never on a time limit to exclude the rest of the people, if that makes
Well,
sense.
the way it's read by staff is you have 30 additional permits.
That's correct.
Within a time frame
Right.
that is established.
And those 30 permits were specifically designated for the water
For the
district.
water district,
That is
yes,
correct.
yes.
That part is correct. That was a standalone request. And then the 6 months was a standalone request, and then Mrs. Morris asked for it to be 90 days, and I said that would be fine. And part of that was because otherwise it puts it out into March, and I think the confusion at the desk would be difficult to know if they were in what year. And that's why I went along with that. That wasn't said, but that's why I did it.
I mean, so anyone truly is interested in jumping into this, they have till the...
Only 30, and there's more than 30 agricultural lands. My whole purpose in saying it was that it's the private property rights in District 3 of someone who owns ag land to be able to do that, whether it's now or whether it's in 3 weeks. I mean, it's their property. It's their personal property right.
Well, and to add to that, to add to confusion, they of course could have approached the planning commission for a variance.
Not if they're in the district.
Okay. And so the district is an opt-out, correct?
It was, I thought I put it back in. That's the whole crutch of this one.
We put it back in with some stipulations.
Okay.
So that's where we're coming from.
Yes.
And whether you're ag or rural residential 10, you have until 12/31 to enroll in the water board to get into the game. And this is the same approach we took with Lewiston last year, Weaverville, and more recently, the Trinity Center Coffee Creek.
I understand
So
that.
that's
So
how
my
we try to-
request, once again, is to put Waterworks District 1 back in, and they're not in an opt-out situation, period.
That was not, that definitely was not.
Yeah, that's not what we voted on last time.
I'm not going backwards, I'm saying.
I understand, the request is not that we add it in here, because understanding we can't would be that we start over and do the first reading, if I'm interpreting your
Correct.
request.
So, yes.
Correct, okay. Do you have any other items for technical development?
I actually did not see the December 31st, 2017 date in here.
And that was a mistake, I apologize for that. It is now, it was combined in with the Coffee Creek, it's now separated out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and I think this is part of the confusion. We're always looking at things that aren't quite put together. And so it's like, if someone reads it, you think you see it, but we haven't really had a 100% cleaned up version. And I will say that I think that adds to the confusion.
Well, I will hold my mouth.
Okay. Do you have any changes or any corrections?
I do.
Any technical? You do?
I do. I have
Okay.
one clarification and, so, let me get there, I apologize.
No, take your time.
Zoomed off in the spot. So under the requirements, we have, I'm trying to find where we do the water board requirements. Like I said, I can always find it when I'm not under pressure.
Because you're not under pressure.
Okay, so yes, under the requirements, on page 7, three I's. We have proof of enrollment in good standing with the North Coast Water Board or the State Water Board. And under definitions, we have proof of enrollment shall mean proof of order number from the North Coast or State Water Quality. Since our action is to be in good standing, I would like to add proof of order number and in good standing. So we have both of those consistent, so people understand that.
What letter on the definition?
I'm sorry, P? On page 5, P?
And that would not be required because they do reference each other, but however, if we'd like to do it for a point of clarification, that is an amendment that can be made. Because of the fact that in the body, it discusses it as good standing is the intent and what would be applied, but again, I'm happy to add that in if we'd like a clarification.
Have you been talked out of it?
I don't,
Not been talked about.
there's no reason to talk me out of it, I'm just saying that this is, this is a clarification, not a substantive change.
And that's all the only changes that I have.
So is it getting added in or?
It's being clarified. It will be
Cleared
added-
up.
It will be added to one paragraph so they both match.
Okay, so on P, you're at.
Yes, and P, we would be adding shall mean proof of order number in good standing from the state or North Coast or the state water.
Supervisor Morris.
No.
Okay. I have nothing on it. Going to open it up to public comment. Anybody have any public comment on this item? Please step up and form a line and good morning.
Edward Manassi in Hayfork. I have a question. If someone in the water district wanted to do the under 2,000 square foot that didn't require the water board permit, can they just come and apply at the county now?
We did not change that tonight, to your understanding.
Because as far as I know, the 2,000 and under didn't require a water board permit.
You're correct, from the water
Okay.
board. We were still using
The other question, My operation, I plan to stay medical, and there's a couple things I was wondering about that. I'm interested in the micro business because that allows the on-site sales, which is going to generate tourism. The only problem with a micro business is you're only allowed a 10,000 square feet grow. And if you got to totally be integrated and pay all that money just to work 10,000 square feet, it's not really going to be cost effective. I think a micro business should be able to have the type 3 grow, not just a 10,000 square foot grow. And I'd also like to see that permit be able to cover multiple properties, not all on one, because like we had the fire, it wiped out your whole garden. If it could cover 2 or 3 locations, adding up to the total of the 1 acre square foot grow, that would help to mitigate that and also make more parcels able to be worked into that. Rather than have to have a huge one to have a 1 acre grow, you could have it spread out. And as far as taxes, I'm still in favor of sales tax. That brings money in, doesn't take our money out of our pocket.
We got
That's
it
it.
for us. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else for public comments?
My name is Evan Barrow from Hayfork. I just want to read what was in the paper regarding the waterworks #1. A few changes include elimination of the Trinity Waterworks District #1 in Hayfork from the list of densely populated areas where commercial cultivation is excluded. At the insistence of District 3 Supervisor Bobby Chadwick, it is removed from the banned areas, and an additional 30 permits were added to the cap of 500, enabling property owners in the water district to apply by a deadline of December 31st if their property zoning allows agricultural uses. That sounds to me like what Supervisor Chadwick is saying, what the newspaper said, and not what you guys are saying. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Terry Mines, Junction City. Hey, Kevin, just a clarification. You can't have-
Terry.
Well, just he asked you guys for something, I'm sorry.
We'll get to that.
Okay, state law, it's not even illegal in the state law, so I was gonna save you a problem.
Thank you, Terry.
I think as far as this goes, I'm very confused because from what I understood, and by the way, the paper in this county is unfortunately not very accurate.
Not great paper.
No, it's a great paper, but unfortunately it doesn't get everything perfectly accurate. But my question was, why can't we just go back to the tape real quick here? Somebody go look at this tape, see what you agreed on, and let's move on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Terry. And just for your information, it was looked at, careful notes were taken, and that's why it's in this form. You're going to get knocked. Run up here.
I don't run.
I know, that's why I said it.
Sorry,
Thank you.
since my injuries and my new hips, I don't run, but I am here. So, well, I did want to thank the board, especially Supervisors Rose and Morris, for bringing this ordinance forward. It's been years in the making. Had other things to say, but now that this issue of the cutout of the water district seems not to be as clear as it was to me when I left this meeting. It was very clear to me that the motion that was made and that was passed put the water district back into the cutout area, but allowed for an extra 30 permits that could be applied for through the end of this year. Now, as far as extending that application, for 2 years now, people have known that there was this deadline coming up. Many of the people who have applied for their licenses have followed those deadlines, and you are now, by extending that other 30 and the deadlines, allowing people who thought that they would just skate to see what they were going to do until all of a sudden now it's a mad rush to get there. The cutout of the Hayfork Water District, as included in the ordinance, gives our community an opportunity to maintain the safety and character of our town for our families and for the tourists and visitors who come through on their way to our fairs, festivals, and school athletic programs. And it also provides neighborhoods for folks who want to raise their families or retire in our beautiful community without being surrounded by commercial growth. This ordinance also provides protection and guidelines for those farmers who have worked so hard to become compliant, licensed businesses and whom we wish to welcome as neighbors and members of our community. We still feel strongly that a midweek nighttime meeting of the board in Hayfork, so that everyone in our community can have input regarding what our town will look like, is necessary, not only for this issue of the cutout, but also for the issues that are coming down the pike. Are we going to have a cannabis testing lab? Are we going to allow nurseries? How many? Our town has the right to have a meeting to say how we, as our town, want to have our community look. And we are not being given that opportunity due to the inability for people who live and work daytime jobs to be able to come to these meetings. So I strongly recommend and suggest that this ordinance go through with the carve-out in as it was voted on, as the motion was stated, and as it is currently printed, and that the town of Hayfork be able to come together in a meeting where we have a map of the water district, we have understandings of what other businesses are going to impact our community, and then we will know not just who out there is in industrial or who out there is in commercial or agriculture, but where everything's going to be, and the community itself will have some say. But you moved to keep that cutout in and to allow those extra 30, and that was very clear on the day that you made that motion, and I recommend that you stick to it. Thank you very much.
And just a quick follow-up, this is your second or third request for a meeting in Hayfork?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jake Hacklow, Hayfork. I just wanted to take a minute to thank the board and the ad hoc committee for I believe, very functional, very productive weekend meeting workshop in Hayfork. It was very well attended. Months and months ago. That there was a lot of great ideas brought to the table. We also have a fantastic supervisor that I know, as she publicly stated in our fantastic newspaper, is willing to have meetings with the community about this. I also was very clear at our last meeting that we were mimicking exactly the same thing we've done with other cutouts such as Lewiston, and making it fair for these people in the water district to come into this program, which as a license holder in this kind of feels like a slap in the face to myself, who has worked for a couple of years now to be part of this. But I also understand that, like I was with Unclassified, they were cut out for a time and put it at a disadvantage. But I think that was very clear, and I think the most important thing for us to remember here is we've come a long way, and we've taken some big steps backwards and some huge steps forwards, and I'd like to keep moving forward with this, because January 1st with the state is becoming very, very close. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment?
Good morning, Board. My name is Eric Lona from outside of Hayfork. I wish to express my thank you for everything you've done over the years. This has been a long, hard process, and I urge you to pass the ordinance as written. And thank you.
Thank you.
Kate Graves from Lewiston. I've been coming to these meetings for longer than some of the supervisors have. And it really bothers me when supervisors, there shouldn't be confusion among you as to what you pass. It's no coincidence that a lot of people and the local paper have the same impression of what was passed. So part of the reason that the minutes are important and that this gets out quicker to people, this should have been made public, this could have been caught quicker. And it wasn't put out properly, and so it wasn't, and therefore it wasn't caught quickly. When you've made this error, and some of us think you made an error, these cutouts you've done are already problematic because you've opened us up to litigation for anyone that has ag timber land to sue the county for a take on their property. And when someone does that, how much is that going to cost us when you took the ability to have that business on their property for however many years they say they want to do it? And you guys didn't take that into consideration at all. You just let your county council just tell you stories. And, well, yeah, it's not based on population. It's like Supervisor Grove says, land use and zoning, and you just ignored it. And now you've ignored it, and we'll pay for it, and their law firm will make money, and it'll come out of our general fund.
Thank you, Ms. Graves. Any other public comment?
Good morning. I had a bit of caffeine, so apologize. Thank you for the opportunity to address you on this really important economic development as well as environmental protection opportunity for Trinity County. You're taking an important step forward in this burgeoning legal industry. I was fortunate to attend the California National Cannabis Industry Association conference in Anaheim last week, and the wealth of information was overwhelming. We heard from the top cannabis regulators, from the California Insurance Commissioner, the Congressman, the head of the CHP, and a bevy of experts. And one point that stood out clearly is that California alone is the 6th largest economy in the world. With us coming online with legal cannabis industry, we're positioned to be about an $8 billion industry right out of the gate, which is going to be the largest cannabis economy in the world. We already surpassed Colorado in its adult use and its medical with only our medical. So it's a huge opportunity. And so I'm really excited to see your continued work on developing additional ordinances, like the lab testing, the nurseries, the manufacturing. I think importantly, I'd like to see you move quickly to distribution and retail as well, so we can fully capture the potential economic impact, because it's really going to be that value add to the raw product that's going to bring even more economic benefit. So I'm hoping that we can get to those ordinances next. But on this particular ordinance, as a potential investor and a Trinity County property owner for nearly 10 years, I do have a couple of concerns that I request the board publicly address today before the final passage, because I think it's real important, as brought up, that this ordinance is in compliance with state law, because we don't want to have something drawn back when people invest tens and sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars in this new industry that might refute or negate our licenses because the ordinance is not legal. One of those is actually regarding the carve-outs, and you may have a legitimate legal basis for this, but I'd like to understand because I haven't heard it articulated. So there is this California government code. It exists in law. It's 65860. This has been brought to your attention before by attorneys, which states that the zoning ordinance shall be consistent with the city or county general plan. Our general plan may be out of date, it may be old, but it's our general plan. And the California Supreme Court has upheld this. So that if you go contrary to the general plan, which right now, if we look at the carve-outs, there's close to 600 parcels that actually would otherwise qualify for the application for cannabis licensing or cultivation that you've excluded. So it's contrary to our general plan, and on its face could potentially be considered illegal and null and void, which would then null and void all the licenses underneath. So I'd like that addressed today before you vote, because I would assume that you've addressed it, but I haven't heard it publicly. So I would like to hear that. CEQA, that's a big question as well. If you could provide clarification to if our CEQA is going to be able to cover the cultivators, because as I've heard, most likely the cultivators are going to need to individually look at their properties for CEQA because of our small kind of, I don't say exclusive, but the urgency ordinance CEQA. So thank you for your time and consideration. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Is there any additional public comment? Seeing none, I'm going to bring it back to the board. Regarding the last item, that's something that can be discussed with Leslie and Rick. They're very specific in their thoughts, and they've been working on it very hard with legal counsel, additional legal counsel, and even other legal counsel.
Let me just jump in.
And so we can move forward with either putting this forward or moving it to...
What we've stated is, we did state that the CEQA has been noticed and is in the process of going through a process. There is nothing else to say, but we have a good CEQA document, in my opinion, and it's going through the process.
And it will continue.
So that's kind of the answer when it comes to CEQA.
Okay, thank you.
And the document is available on the county's planning department's website and on the commercial cannabis website for public comment.
Thank you. So we've closed public comment. We're back with this item board.
I did want to address.
Would you like to? Okay, go ahead.
Well, I would like to address some of the questions, or just especially one. The micro business is a state law micro business. This is a license that we haven't got to issue yet. That's on the list to get to. I will say all this kind of nonsense that we've been dealing with the last several months has slowed this whole process down. We've lost at least 90 days of doing other ordinances in that, but micro business is on the list, but we will comply with state law, and it will be 10,000 square feet unless something changes.
I have a point of interest on that. They're offering now temporary ones. Should I get the
Kevin.
state one?
Kevin,
Right.
we're not in discussion about this right now. If Supervisor Groves is making a comment or direction, that is it.
Thank you.
Yeah, until we have our licenses, state licenses will not be valid. The point that I think it's a very good point that Ms. Lonos talks about is the Hayfork issue. Hayfork has a community plan. I would urge, and hopefully the county would support in any way, for the Hayfork community to work on their community plan, and Rick's rubbing his head there, but that there's been an active, ongoing community plan in Hayfork, and this is where that level, the people of Hayfork get to sit down and hash it out amongst themselves, and I would hope that program would take off.
Follow up to that, Hayfork has a new community plan that has been submitted, and I don't know if it's gone through the planning commission. It was worked on for years.
Yeah, we need an updated general plan to do
Before
that.
it's integrated into that. So there's an existing,
First-
that's the
first one
confusion
is
I had. There was an existing
master
one that I didn't know of,
document.
and there's a new one that has been presented.
So there is a plan moving forward to do a general plan, but a general plan will take years.
The Hayfork Community Plan prioritizes agriculture as an
No, the Hayfork community plan was completed about 2 years ago, maybe 3. And if you wish to get into the new one, that's what I'm talking about, the new one, go open it up, speak to planning, and see what it says about what's moving forward.
I'm just saying what's in the general plan right now.
Okay, it's the old Hayfork community plan. Yes.
I was just going to add to Supervisor Groves, along with the micro business license and the other ones, manufacturing, distribution will be coming up, but as he pointed out, we have been slowed down, so. And Chair, I don't know if the board, if this is the board, but there's some questions I'd like to, for the council on. Perhaps we break for lunch since we don't have no one on the table, and then we come back.
I'll give you probably about 4 minutes with county council right now to get through this. Thank you. Do a sidebar.
We take a 5-minute break so people can.
If you would, let's have a 5-minute break.
How about 10?
Okay. We're still on the item 4.9, had our public comment, had our technical questions.
I just would,
We need to listen to Supervisor Morris right now? I'm sorry.
yes, you do.
Yeah.
I just have a quick little add to kind of what Supervisor Groves was talking about. Again, if you're interested in participating on discussion on any of these future licenses coming up, they are being heard at the Planning Commission, so I can't stress that enough. That is a great setting of vetting out these issues with the public, so that before it comes to the board, I just wanted to remind people of that. Otherwise, I think the other technical questions were addressed. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
If I also, the other technical question, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to have, I think it would be helpful for the public and the board if you were to explain your process when you go back with Naomi and look at notes and.
In terms of when we're sitting through a board meeting where supervisors are making changes to anything, we do take notes as you're speaking. I take them, the deputy clerk of the board takes them as well. Once you're completed and you're getting ready to vote on it, I do read back to you what the changes that were made. And that is what is written down is what you are adopting. I then forward my notes to the deputy clerk who compares it with her notes as well to make sure that they're accurate. If they're not, we go back and consult the tape.
Okay. So I just thought that would be helpful. But they're not taking our notes, you guys are actually going back and verifying.
If there's difference in between what we have written, we do verify it. That is correct.
Okay, so what I'm looking for is a motion, either waive the second reading of and enact the ordinance as presented. That's what's requested today, and anything else that you want to move forward with.
I'm ready to make a motion. I would move to waive the reading with the clarifications that were made. So I think that was clarifying the homeschool language that you captured. Supervisor Grove's clarification on proof of enrollment. The December 31st date for Hayfork Water District, Trent County Water Works. And then I would, Supervisor Chadwick, I would like to move forward with this as presented. We can't afford really more delays by adding an agricultural
Okay, I'm going to slow you down right here. I need your motion, and
So
I'd like to make that and give some discussion.
That's fine.
Yeah,
So-
I don't mean to cut you off, sorry about that. I know, I'll be very cut you off.
So that's my motion. The clarifications and make sure we're clear about the 1231 for Hayfork.
1231, three changes.
I have 4 changes. Want to make sure the fourth one is captured, which is adding SB 94
Right.
and the definitions from Mercer.
Right.
Okay.
So can you read that whole thing back?
Absolutely. Under commercial cannabis, which is 1F, we're adding SB 94. Under the definitions for schooling, we are adding the homeschool exemption in there, so excluding homeschooling under U. Moving down. We have added and clarified that under Trinity County Water Works District 1 by December 31st, 2017, and that is on page 9, 7, bullet 3 now.
Got it.
And the clarification, I apologize, I have to go back up, but the clarification that Supervisor Groves provided related to the proof of enrollment must be in good standing, and that is under definitions P.
Thank you.
I will second.
Okay, first from Morris regarding, as stated, with 4 changes, and they're minor, they're simply technical changes or corrections. And I've got a second from Supervisor Groves.
Then just to clarify for Supervisor Chadwick,
More discussion.
Right, so that's where I'm going to go.
Thank you, Judy, sorry.
That's all right. So I don't want to delay. We're delayed enough. Plus, we're still waiting. CEQA, as you heard, is out for comment. I want to see what is presented there. Doesn't mean we can't go back and revisit specific ag issue for Hayfork. At this time, I'm not comfortable doing that at the moment. I'm comfortable of what we discussed last time. If this came up since then, that's okay too, but I'm comfortable addressing it at a later date, which we can do, but I want to see some other information come through as well. So I just wanted to make sure you understood where I was coming when I made my motion.
With all due respect, Supervisor Morris, I don't know if this delay you're talking about, we're not in an urgency ordinance, we're actually talking about a permanent ordinance. So in my calculations, we're about a year ahead of time. The second point, I'm glad that the CEQA is out. I'm hoping, my understanding that last time that it was up for a review, and it's in the review process for the public, but I thought that, and I could be wrong, county council said that we have an expert, or maybe it was Supervisor Groves, I don't remember. We had somebody, an expert that was looking at it. Has that expert looked at it, and what was their conclusions? And the third point was, I believe Mrs. Wright asked about a public address concerning one of her questions, number 65680, code. And she could probably tell me better, but I think she related it to the carve-outs. And I don't think she requested a public address, but I don't remember hearing it addressed back to her. And I would say that that probably should be addressed since she asked for it.
So, in response to my concern about delay, we, as Supervisor Groves pointed out, we are delayed by another 90 days by having to take this path into the permit process. We have folks who've been moving in this process, who are looking at the state January 1st deadline. They're trying to get to market. It doesn't mean others can't participate once we get back on track, and this is what we're trying to do. That is my concern for a delay, because we have already costs going from an urgency to the permit have cost us 90 days already. Pushing this back would really cause a great deal of hardship for folks who are in our system, trying to get in our system, staff trying to process licensing versus being in a holding pattern, so that is my concern of further delay at the moment.
And once again, I respectfully disagree with you. We came together in 8 days from the August 28th to September 5th. Here we are on October 3rd, and I think we're moving at rocket speed for government, actually.
Yeah, it took a lot of extra work, and what I'm referring to as the delay is other licenses have had to be put on the back shelf to accommodate this little detour. So that is also being affected by delay. Try and get those other licenses done by January as fast as we can, and we only have so much time and only so much staff. So it's not just cultivation, it's other licenses that are getting delayed.
And once again, I disagree. I think we've never moved so fast. Second question was to County Council in regards to the expert. I don't remember who referred it back, said that we had an expert, and I have not seen a report, and it was not provided. When could I see that, and when would I know about it? And the third question had to do with Mrs. Wright's public address for the carve-outs.
Chair, would you like an answer?
No, not yet. I'll answer regarding 65860. We'll look at that in the future. I have no idea what selected code that falls under. I don't believe that was stated. I went to look it up and I could not find it, simply because there's no code related to it. And that's absolutely necessary in order to find this number and look it up. Regarding the expert, it's up to County Council and the ad hoc committee to work through this process. I don't know if you're necessarily part of this process outside of the ad hoc committee, so we'll leave it at that. At some point, you should be getting together with County Council to review all of the items on your own and to deal with whatever expert you're talking about in whatever field they are. That is not stated. You're being very nebulous. I actually have no idea what you're talking about. Expert, yes. Regarding what? CEQA, regarding grow, regarding whatever. Okay.
And I said I did not bring the expert up. It was brought up that there was an expert reviewing it. And I said I wasn't sure.
Which we have to do no matter what, because we want to work forward and cross our T's and dot our I's.
And as a reminder, it is published, it's available for the public as of last Wednesday, so anyone can look at it.
Are there any other motions?
And I will just add, since we're just rambling on here, we're building everybody's appetite and attention. The CEQA document is such that supervisors don't get to see it before it's published, because we are going to have to make a decision on it. So it's not, we don't have access to it. We got to see it the first day that it got public. That comes through staff and then gets put out there. So just to clear up any working in secret nonsense that may be running around the room.
And also, depending on how you vote or your decision, you can use this to save face if you did not understand or really understand what we voted on last time and agree with the paper. So I would like to call for the question, even though I'm not supposed to.
I made a motion.
Do you wish to make another motion or a subsequent?
No, I thought we were still in discussion though.
We are, and
So I would like to know when we could put the waterworks back on the agenda in order to amend a permanent ordinance, and how that would look, since Supervisor Morris just said that we could do that.
I'm not in favor of looking at that at this point. Maybe once we get our permanent ordinance, which they've been working on for how many years. Keep it down. Keith, are you in favor of doing that?
No, I do have a technical question, though, of county council. What is the process in general for the amending of any ordinance?
Chair, that would be so great for me, answer. Thank you.
Might as well.
So the amending of any ordinance is the same as the institution of any ordinance. It would have to have a first reading, a second reading, publication, and then 30-day waiting period. We do require a public notice in the newspaper prior to anything that relates to land use changes, and that's a 10-day requirement. So we would have to notice 10 days, have it be in the paper on a Thursday, if we take that into consideration. Wednesday, I apologize. And then 10 days thereafter, hold a meeting where we have a public hearing and then have the first reading.
Okay, thank you.
And don't tell me the MODOK paper comes out on Thursday. Okay, never mind.
I don't read that garbage.
And, yeah,
So to answer your question, Mr. Chair, everything that Supervisor Chadwick had asked for, in essence, is been in this ordinance, and the allowing of people in that district to completed their water board permit. Doesn't matter if it's ag or TINs or whatever, if they're compliant, they get a chance to get in. And quite frankly, compared to other places, I think we've been over backwards to accommodate her wishes. So I would have no interest in putting that on the agenda at this time.
Judy?
it will be a while. I am comfortable once SECRA is through its process. Once I see what comes back out of SECRA, so I can't. It's not gonna be next week, I'll tell you that. In terms of how soon.
Okay, I have a motion. We understand the motion. I have a second. Susie, I don't hear a subsequent. Could you please pull the board?
Absolutely. Supervisor Gross?
Aye.
Supervisor Morris?
Yes.
Supervisor Chadwick? Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Motion passes. Yes, I guess we'll go lunch Thank you for bearing with us.
We could go through
I don't know, it's 12:21, 1:30, is that enough time?
Thank you, board. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Yell at me now.
Wait till tomorrow.
You.
Me?